These 4 films all look the same, but they were all produced by different studios at different times. Of course, they aren't entirely identical, but these movies all reached the same standard stylistically, this semi-photorealistic look, this Pixar look. And while this style of animation is incredibly well done, it's awfully overused and lacks a certain depth to it. This style fails to aid in any storytelling to its film, simply rendering this look as something pretty to look at. So what exactly is the Pixar look? It's a style of animation depicting semi-photorealistic visuals. This style emerged in 1995 when Pixar released its landmark film, Toy Story. It was a revolutionary release, the first fully computer-animated film that set the standard for what animated films will be in the decades to come. After the release of Toy Story, Pixar continued releasing movies with the same style, where environments and sceneries are incredibly detailed and similar to reality. And while the characters are pretty cartoony, they still hold a level of detail that is very realistic, from highly detailed clothing to naturally moving hair. Take a look at this screen grab from Woody from Toy Story 4. The clothing texture is incredibly complex all the way down to the fibers added. Pixar became masters at defining these very realistic details. Although titled the Pixar look, it's a style used in a variety of animated media. After Disney Studios bought Pixar in 2006, they too began implementing this highly detailed animation style into their films. It worked so well for Disney and Pixar that it was only a matter of time until other studios also began to work with this style. As is evident from all of these examples, this style dominated the animation industry for a long time. So why has the Pixar style prevailed for so long? Well, in an interview, Peter Ramsey, co-director of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, mentions that the standard of animation is really high and really detailed, where animated films are capable of achieving an almost photorealistic look.
The standard is really high, but the standard has become kind of the standard. So you see a lot of movies that have, the same feel, and it's because the technology is so demanding and so baked in.
It's hard for production companies to be willing to stop doing what they know works to try something new. When the standard is so highly detailed and realistic, it's difficult to step away and return to a more rudimentary look. However, recently we've seen a growth in animation styles that break away from this trend, creating unique visuals. What these stylized looks accomplish that the Pixar look can't is a contribution to furthering the narratives and themes of their respective films. Take a look at these examples. These films have very unique and different feelings to them. This one looks like an illustration from a storybook, where the background is comprised of very simple shapes like circles and rectangles. In this example, the texture on this fur jacket is just a hand-drawn scribble texture instead of an ultra-realistic fur. And look at the painted texture of this animation. And this one, where they use cross-hatching to create texture and colors in the background are splitting to create a blurred-out effect. These styles, compared to these ones, are vastly different. It's easy to tell that these movies tell entirely different stories, are set in other worlds, and depict different characters. If you're interested in animation or in films, then you've probably heard of a little movie called Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, released in 2018 and produced by Sony Picture Animation. As someone studying animation, I've heard about how revolutionary this film is time and time again, and for good reason. It's a very creatively made movie, and as much as I could go on about how excellent this film is, what I want to focus on is the way filmmakers used this comic book style to further the narrative of this movie. For starters, this is a superhero movie. What better art style to take inspiration from for a superhero movie other than comic books? Creators of Into the Spider-Verse wanted to avoid anything that didn't look like it belonged in an illustrated world. To do this, they recreated the look of half-toning seen in comic books and avoided techniques like motion blur, opting for motion lines instead. Director Rodney Rothman said in an interview that they wanted to recreate elements from old art styles, things like hand-drawn emotion lines or cross-hatching and ben-day dots. These things were included to give the audience something new to look at, but these additions also help express the character Miles Morales.
It's about expressing Miles' emotions and expressing Miles' characters.
Miles is a creative character who likes to draw and is very artistic, so by including these elements into their animation, filmmakers could visually express Miles' personality. To achieve these looks, filmmakers had to go through a lot of trial and error. It required the creation of new programs and exploring new techniques. However, despite these setbacks, creators believe that the look of this film was a critical addition to making this film work. There's a lot more to say about this film and its animation, but I also want to talk about another film called Klaus, released in 2019 and produced by Sergio Pablos Animation Studios. Unlike Into the Spider-Verse, Klaus is a 2D animated film, and for the last maybe 25 years, 2D animation has been declining, particularly with feature-length films. 2D animation is very time-consuming and requires a lot of skill to perfect. It's usually easy to tell the difference between 2D and 3D, but what makes Klaus stand out is how easily this film could be mistaken for 3D. This is because of the impressive lighting that this film achieved. The lighting that Klaus incorporated gave characters a lot of volume that is usually missing from 2D animation. In fact, creators of Klaus had to design a whole new tool just for lighting alone. So this brings up the question, why 2D animation? This film could have easily been achieved with CGI instead, and it wouldn't have required creating a whole new tool. Well, like Into the Spider-Verse, the creators of this film had a specific look they desired to implement. The director, Sergio Pablos, wanted the film to look organic and nostalgic. Using 2D allowed creators to attain this look. The soft shapes and colors gave this film an almost storybook feel, creating a wistful and sentimental mood, perfectly fitting the tale it aimed to tell. Ultimately, these two films had the same goal, using new software to recreate old art styles. The same can be said for The Mitchells vs. the Machines. Released in 2021 and produced by Sony Pictures Animation. This film had a similar style goal to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where filmmakers desired to create a 3D movie and incorporate 2D elements. On its surface level, this film is about humans versus technology, and the design choices and art style were all considered when trying to depict this relationship. In an interview with Cartoon Brew, Lindsay Olivares, the character and production designer on the project, said, quote, "Our movie is about humans versus machines. Obviously, humans are always making these films, but how can we make it feel more like a human hand made it? Seeing strokes of brush texture from the Look Dev surfacing team, you can feel like it's almost more traditionally made in ways. That felt appropriate for this human versus machine story." Designers aimed to make this film look like watercolor and focused on creating animated characters that felt real as flesh and blood. Now, looking at these characters, it's relatively easy to see that they stray far away from the looks of reality. But what makes them feel real is not the likeness to living humans, but how the art feels organic and handcrafted. Look at these tree textures in the background. They look almost painted. It's not the incredible attention to detail that makes this style feel human, but the lack thereof that does. What I mean to show with all of these examples is how deliberately these films strayed from being too artificial. All these filmmakers intended to return to a traditional and rudimentary look, even though it came with many challenges. By pointing this out, I don't mean to say that the Pixar look is easy to achieve or that its principles are simple. However, there are many templates and examples to look at when using that style. When most animated films use this technique, it's no longer specific enough to help further a film's narrative in the way these examples do. Let's pretend for a moment that you haven't seen any of these movies. Looking at these still photos, it wouldn't be unfounded to believe that they were all from the same film. It's like looking at a mass-produced item distributed to multiple vendors, lacking uniqueness and character. Visually, these films lack personality, and while the stories are entirely different, it's nearly impossible to tell just by looking at them alone. It'll be interesting to see how animation will change in the future. I believe we will begin to see larger animation companies start to implement more unique styles into their feature-length films. In fact, DreamWorks is releasing a new Puss in Boots film, and looking at the trailer, the style of this film seems to be influenced by traditional art, with a lot of brush strokes incorporated in the textures and even the addition of motion lines that we saw used in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Whether it's a style chosen to help influence the storyline or just jumping on the traditional animation bandwagon, I'm not sure. But it's an exciting change to see nonetheless. The Pixar look takes a lot of time and effort to create, and while it looks incredible, it's been used to the point that it's become generic. While I don't think the Pixar look should stop being used, there should start being more variety in how we use it. Style can be a considerable benefactor when making a story, and rather than animation companies adhering to a standard, it shows a lot more care and creativity when energy and resources are put toward experimenting with new looks. In the end, we will see new styles come and go. Maybe one day Pixar style will be merely a thing of the past. But what I hope won't change is the reigniting passion and evolution in animation we are seeing today.